Okay, I think we might just make a start. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our Single Touch Payroll Phase 2 webinar. Really appreciate the time you've taken out of your busy schedules to join us today. My name is Romeo Velardo, and I'm one of the partners here at our Partners, and today I'm joined by Lauren Lambden, one of our bookkeeping in Xero specialists. The main focus of today's webinar is Phase 2 of Single Touch Payroll, which is all new, and we'll be explaining what this is and how it affects the way that you will be processing payroll for employees going forward. We will also be providing, sorry about that. We will also be providing you with a demonstration of how to complete Stage 1 in Xero, let you know what is and isn't changing with STP, give you a high-level overview of what to expect with STP Phase 2 and 3. We'll also give you a reminder of the important things to consider when dealing with payroll within your business, which is really important. And finally, some tips and tricks when using Xero payroll software. Please note that there'll be an opportunity at the end of the webinar for questions, and if you do have a question, please type it in the chat box at the bottom of your screen. Alternatively, if your issue may be a bit more detailed and you may need a more detailed discussion, please feel free to give our office a call or just get in contact with us separately. Firstly, I just want to give a bit of a background to STP, or Single Touch Payroll. It was introduced as a government initiative in July 2019, and the intention was to make it easier for employers to report payroll information to the ATO, whilst at the same time providing payroll information to the ATO, and at the same time providing real-time information. I do apologise. It was introduced in stages and is now compulsory for all employers to report all wages paid to employees via Single Touch Payroll. If you're not already registered, you must do so immediately. With STP, you currently report salaries and wages, PAYG withholding, and superannuation each time you process your payroll, whether that be weekly, fortnightly, or monthly. As you'll see later on, with the rollout of the additional phases of Single Touch Payroll, more information will be reported to the ATO, which means that the ATO will have access to a greater level of real-time payroll information than ever before. The ATO can already identify whether an employee is behind with their obligations, such as payment of superannuation guarantee and PAYG withholding. In particular, we've actually already seen audits of superannuation guarantee coming through, where the ATO have identified either late payments or no payment of superannuation guarantee by matching payroll data against the superannuation accounts of your employees. With the rollout of the next phase of STP, it'll be interesting to see exactly how the additional information will be shared with other government agencies, including Fair Work Australia, amongst others, and the types of action that could be taken where an employer does fall behind. We'll just have to watch this space. So now I'd like to hand over to Lauren, who will further explain Single Touch Payroll Phase 2. Thanks, Lauren.
Thank you, Romeo, and hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. So now that we have touched on the background of Single Touch Payroll and the reason for its introduction, let's get into what Single Touch Payroll Phase 2 is all about. In the 2019-2020 budget, the government announced that Single Touch Payroll, which is commonly referred to as STP, would be expanded to include additional information. Under Single Touch Payroll Phase 2, the Australian government will now require all employers to report additional information through each STP pay event. Now, this information will include details such as income, payment type, and reasons for termination of employment, but we will elaborate on those in more detail later in the webinar. All Australian businesses that have employees on their payroll will be impacted by this change, regardless of the number of employees you have. So if you are employing at the moment, you will be impacted by STP Phase 2. It is hoped that this additional reporting will assist in ensuring employees are paid correctly for the separate pay items and also reduce the need for employees to report information about their staff to multiple government agencies. Under STP Phase 2, you need to report additional information to the ATO in a few new areas. Now, these changes are detailed as follows. So we'll start with tax file number declarations. Employers are currently required to submit a paper or an electronic tax file number declaration form to the ATO for all new employees that you hire. Now, with STP Phase 2, this is incorporated through that reporting, and it eliminates the need to submit the tax file number declaration form to the ATO as a separate process. It would now be submitted directly through STP software. Income types. The reporting of separate income types is now being introduced as a part of Single Touch Payroll. Some income types that you may be aware of include being a closely held payee of a business. And if you're unaware of what a closely held payee of a business is, it's an individual directly related to the entity from which they receive payments. For example, a family member or a director. Termination reasons will now be mandatory to be reported to the ATO when an employee finishes their employment. Previously, an employer may have been asked to provide an employee with a termination certificate, but now with the introduction of STP Phase 2, the reason for the termination needs to be included in the STP report, which is submitted to the ATO, and that eliminates the need for a separation certificate to be produced separately. Paid leave will now no longer be reported to the ATO as a gross total payment. Instead, what will now happen is that paid leave will be separated by type and associated amount and classified by specific leave types. So, for example, annual leave and sick leave will be reported separately to the ATO through Single Touch Payroll and will no longer appear as a total dollar amount. They'll now have more control to see that you are paying the correct amounts for any paid leave taken by your employees. Allowance types. In STP Phase 2, you now need to report all allowances separately. So some commonly used allowances that you might be aware of or are currently using is the laundry allowance, overtime meal allowance, tool allowances, and travel allowances. Currently, these are included as gross earnings on the STP report. So now that they're expanded, the ATO will have more visibility regarding the types of allowances and the corresponding amount relating to those allowances that you are paying. If you pay directors' fees, these must now be separately included in your STP Phase 2 report. So directors' fees include payments to a director of a company or a person who performs the duties of a director of the company. There might be times when you pay some employees bonus and commission payments. These are typically paid as a lump sum. So previously, these were reported as a part of your gross payment total, but for STP Phase 2 purposes, they'll now need to be reported separately. And finally, employment type. So the employment basis of the employee's basis of employment, that now needs to be shared with the ATO via Single Touch Payroll. So it will be separated into your full-time, your part-time, casual, labour hire or non-employees. And at the conclusion of today's session, I will provide you with a helpful fact sheet that details each of those categories of changes that we just spoke about, because there are quite a few and there are some more details that you might want to look into. Now, what isn't changing with the introduction of Single Touch Payroll Phase 2? So while you need to report additional information in your STP report, all those things that we just touched on, there are many things that will just stay the same. So the way that you lodge your STP will stay the same. That's all done through Xero, which is your STP-enabled software. The due date of the STP reporting, the types of payments that are needed to be made to employees will remain the same. The tax and super obligations will, of course, remain the same. And the current end-of-year finalisation process for Single Touch Payroll will also remain the same. STP Phase 2 will impact your business in a few minor but very important ways. So each time you process a pay run, all those additional details we just spoke about in the previous couple of slides, they'll be sent to the ATO about each of your employees. You will no longer have to send the ATO your employees' TFN declarations. Your employees still do need to complete one, sign it and provide it to you, and you will need to keep it on your employee records. But instead of lodging it as a separate administrative task, you can just submit that data in your first pay event automatically. If you're using a concessional reporting options, such as for closely held payees, you'll be able to tell the ATO that through the reporting types. The ATO will now also share that payroll information that you report to them in near real time with Services Australia. So this will assist Services Australia in identifying different types of income for the purposes of administering their programs, and will also reduce the need for you to provide them with additional information should they request. You will no longer need to provide a separation certificate when your employees leave. The date and the reason for the termination will be included in the STP report. So again, less administrative tasks for you as a business owner. And another key thing that will affect your business is through Single Touch Payroll Phase 2, you will now be able to voluntarily report child support deductions or garnishees. So previously, a deduction report had to be submitted on behalf of an employer to the relevant support agency when they deduct child support for employees' pays. But with the introduction of Single Touch Payroll Phase 2, you're now able to report child support deductions via the pay event, and you no longer need to separately report to the child support registrar. So there are all the few things that will affect your business for STP Phase 2. So what happens now? To help you make the transition, Xero is rolling out the changes in 3 simple stages so that you're ready for STP Phase 2 reporting. You're going to be able to use simple transition tools in Xero to update payroll data smoothly and with ease. So stage 1, which is the stage that is available now, is the employee transition tool. Using the employee transition tool, you'll be able to update existing employee records to capture relevant STP Phase 2 items, like whether you've got an employee or a contractor, for an example. Stage 2, which will be coming over the next few weeks, is the pay item transition. With the pay item transition tool, you can identify and replace non-compliant pay items with new earnings categories defined by STP Phase 2. These new pay items are already available in Xero Payroll for any new staff that you do hire. And stage 3, which is leave categories, that will be coming soon as the final stage. Paid leave is being broken down into additional subcategories for Phase 2. So using the leave transition tool that Xero released, you'll need to update existing leave categories to meet all the new reporting requirements. Xero will notify you within the software when each of these stages are available. But in case you miss that notification, we of course will send out some notifications when it is released. And we also will be running other webinars to cover stage 2 and stage 3 to make sure that you understand how to complete these steps easily. So let's focus on stage 1, the stage that is available to be updated right now in Xero. STP Phase 2 requires more information on the individual parts that make up an employee's pay. And in order to complete those required updates, we can use the employee transition tool, and we can show you this live demo on how to do that. So from the dashboard, you need to navigate to the payroll tab and click employees. You'll have a list of all employees, and each employee will have an update button. By clicking update, you'll be navigated to the transition tool and required to update whether you have an employee or a contractor. You'll then be able to select an income type or how the individual is paid, such as salary and wages or closely held. And finally, the tax scale. This is the pay-as-you-go tax scale category that determines how much tax should be withheld for an employee. Save and continue. Navigate back to the employee tab. Now that one is done, you can continue on the rest of your employees. Once done, click onto the STP Phase 2 portal and mark the task as done once you've ticked off all employees. Really easy steps, and Xero have made it very simple with this employee transition tool, and that's all you need to do to complete STP Stage 1 in Xero. So now that we've conquered what to do for STP Phase 2 Stage 1, let's move on to Stage 2 and Stage 3 in a little more detail. So Stage 2, which is starting to roll out in the next few weeks, you will need to identify and update pay items with the new earnings categories as defined by STP Phase 2. So new earnings categories like directors' fees, bonuses, and commissions, they're already available in Xero Payroll if you do want to get a head start, but more will be coming. And Stage 3, which is the final stage and coming soon, this will be the final step in the transition and will break paid leave into additional subcategories. Xero will support you with a guided payroll experience to help update those existing leave categories to meet the new reporting requirements. So that's a brief summary of Stage 2 and Stage 3, but as I mentioned, we'll run a more in-depth webinar on those once the transition tools are released in Xero. Now that we've covered everything in relation to STP Phase 2, we did want to take this opportunity to touch on some important payroll items to remember, because with these changes, as Romeo mentioned, the ATO and other services are now more aware than ever of pay events and each category within that pay. So with the rollout of Single Touch Payroll, the ATO now have that real-time data to cross-check all their other agencies. And as Romeo mentioned, superannuation is a huge target for the ATO at the moment, and any late payments or unpaid contributions are being targeted. We've seen a huge increase in this activity lately. So it's important to ensure that superannuation is received by the employee's super fund before the quarterly due date. That due date is the 28th of the following month of quarter end. Employees also need to be paid the right pay for all time worked. Think minimum wages, penalty rates, allowances and awards. They're all those really important things to remember when you're paying wages. You can visit Fair Work and they have a lot of helpful information such as a pay calculator or fact section to help make sure that you're paying those correct entitlements. As we mentioned at the start of the webinar, STP Phase 2 now breaks down those pay items, so the ATO and Fair Work will be aware if you're not paying the correct amount of allowances or the correct pay rate for your staff. One of the important rules for STP is that you're required to file your STP event to the ATO on the payday. So please ensure that this is completed in Xero each time you post a pay run and you don't get behind on this task. With WorkSafe Victoria each year, you are required to update your actual rateable remuneration for the prior year and also estimate your rateable remuneration for the current year, as these figures do impact the premium amount that you pay. If you aren't aware, remuneration, when I say that word, that includes wages, salaries, super, and other benefits you pay to workers before tax. If you don't provide your certified remuneration to WorkSafe by the due date, WorkSafe will just estimate your remuneration as 20% more than it was the previous year. So it's important to get this right. And finally, payroll tax. Payroll tax is a levy on wages paid by an employer to its employees when the total taxable wages of an employer exceeds a threshold amount. So payroll tax is self-assessed and lodged by the employer, and the threshold and tax rates, they do vary between the states and territories, but here in Victoria, our threshold for payroll tax is $700,000 of wages over the full financial year. And if you do exceed that threshold amount and you are required to be registered and paying payroll tax, that rate is at 4.85% currently. Now, Xero is a really powerful accounting software with features that will make running your business quicker and easier. So we've just got 4 payroll tips and tricks that you could implement in your payroll routine if you're not already using them at the moment. So using the ATO super feature in Xero is our first one. Xero has this feature to send your employees super contributions electronically to their nominated super funds simply by a few clicks. Based on the payroll liability that you process, you're able to then process a batch of super owing, and Xero will make the payment to each employee's super fund taken directly from your bank account. Now, if you are using Auto Super in Xero at the moment or are thinking of using it, it is important to remember that you need to allow those 6 days of processing time when you submit your batch. This is the time that it takes Xero to complete the administrative process and the super to be received into your employee's fund. So even if you submit the batch in Xero on the 28th of the month, it's still deemed as late if it is not received by the fund by the due date. So that's a really important thing to remember. Even a couple of days late, the ATO will still chase you, and penalties and interest can still apply and will apply. If you do want some more information or assistance on how to use or set up Auto Super in Xero, please reach out to our office and we'll be happy to assist. Using the ABA files in Xero. So when you post a pay run in Xero, what Xero actually does is produces a payment file, which is called an ABA file, and you have the ability to download that. With that ABA file, you can then import it directly into your internet banking and use that file to make batch payments for employees' wages, rather than doing it one by one per employee. That will save you a heap of time if you have quite a large staff list. Setting up bank rules is another tip we wanted to touch on. So bank rules save you manually creating a new transaction each time you get a recurring or similar type of bank statement line. So you can tell Xero how these statement lines should be coded, and then Xero can suggest the right type of transaction and complete some of the details for you. This will save you time, it will help reduce human error, and will also ensure consistent coding, which leads to more efficient reporting in your file and your business. And finally, the last tip is inviting your staff to use Xero Me, which was formerly known as My Payroll. Xero Me shows information that you have entered about your staff. They're able to see their pay slips, their leave requests and timesheets, as well as also submit those leave requests and timesheets and view their current leave balances. Now, inviting your staff to Xero Me doesn't allow them to see any private financial details of your business. They can only see their payroll information that's relevant to them as an employee. So reflecting back on today's presentation and everything that you needed to know about Single Touch Payroll, because we did cover a lot, Single Touch Payroll Phase 2, it kicks off in those 3 simple stages within Xero that we spoke about. Stage 1, the employee transition tool, which you can complete right now. And we went through that demonstration earlier in the presentation. Stage 2 and Stage 3, which are both coming soon. And as mentioned, we will bring you another webinar if you need more information and help on completing Stage 2 and 3 when it is released. All payroll admin users will be notified when Stage 2 and 3 are available within Xero, but we will also notify you as mentioned. We like to make sure that you're on top of everything. And finally, it is important to start planning for your transition now and actioning each step as soon as it becomes available to ensure a really streamlined transition to the next requirement of STP. Okay, I'll just check if we've got any questions that have come through on today's session. Looks like we're pretty good on questions, which is great. Seems like we've covered everything.
Yep, I think so.
Yep, perfect. So on behalf of Romeo and myself, we just want to take the time to thank all of you for attending today's webinar and also your continued support as valued clients of VI Partners. We hope you all have a great evening. And if you do have any further questions about anything that we spoke of in today's webinar surrounding STP Phase 2 in Xero, any of the 3 stages as a part of STP Phase 2, or those payroll tips or important things we spoke about, please reach out to us and we will be happy to assist. A recording of the webinar will be sent through for future reference. Plus, we will also have a short survey that will be sent out on today's session just to ensure that we continue to deliver relevant content that is valued in your business. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.